Welcome back to RFA Insider. This is Amy, and you're tuning in to episode 9B, the second half of our two-part Pride-themed episode. If you haven't heard the first half yet, which is episode 9A, we invited a panel of 3 gay RFA journalists to discuss their personal experiences of being gay in Asian settings or being gay in the field of journalism. In this half, our discussion focuses more on covering LGBTQIA issues, but aspects of the whole discussion are present in both halves. Thanks for listening to RFA Insider, and we'll be right back with me, Eugene, Khwar, Wilson, and Greg, right after this.
You're listening to the RFA Insider podcast, made by 2 real-life staffers at Radio Free Asia.
If you'd like to send us feedback, there are many ways you can do this.
You can send us an email at insider@rfa.org.
You can comment on our webpage at rfa.org/English/insider. Just click on the episode you're listening to and write your comment below.
Or you can send us a tweet at RFA Insider or visit us in person.
No, don't visit us in person.
Right, don't visit us in person. But anyway, we really want to hear from you.
So tune in every other Friday and we'll take you behind the scenes.
And tell you what the news really means here at RFA Insider. Let's move on to coverage of LGBTQIA stories in journalism. So I'd like to start this discussion with a little anecdote from the situation I had when I was trying to do a story on an LGBT issue while I was living in Korea. So this was about 10 years ago in Seoul, and I was working for this city-run English language radio station. It was while Seoul Pride was going on. Mm-hmm. That Seoul Pride is called the SQCF, or the Seoul Queer Cultural Festival. And every year that they do this, they have the event in front of Seoul City Hall, and across the street, there's always self-proclaimed Christian groups who have this counter-pride event where they will shout on loudspeakers or make lots of noise and try to disrupt the event any way they can by stepping in front of. They have a parade, and they'll try to step in front of the parade and prevent people from marching. They'll even hold these signs that, are reminiscent of the Westboro Baptist Church that say things like, God hates you for this or that. And they will also engage with individual people who are attending Pride and telling them that they're going to hell and all these other things and awful things like that. So it came to my attention either through Facebook or one of my other circles that there was this church that was supporting LGBTQIA individuals and actively trying to recruit them to come to their congregation. And so, especially because this issue, every year the media frames it as like the gay people on one side and the Christians on the other, and they're always at odds, right? And so I thought it was interesting. There's this church that's trying to invite them into the congregation. And so I asked the people around me, can I interview the pastor from this church and cover this story and see what they have to say about it? And they said, go for it. And so basically, long story short, when I was interviewing the pastor, he basically said that we interpret the Christian religion in a different way. God is more inclusive than what they would have you believe. And that was that. I made my recordings, I edited it together, and I was about to go on the air. And then they said, well, wait, did you get anybody from the other side? And I'm like, what do you mean the other side? And they're like, well, you should go interview another Christian pastor who would say that, no, that's not okay with Christianity, and put that in there. And I'm like, well, then, yeah, but then, that's obvious. I mean, isn't that obvious? I didn't feel like that would add anything to the report, really. And so they said, well, it's too biased and too pro-gay, so I don't know if we're gonna air this. So I had to call him up and say, I'm sorry, thank you for the interview, but we can't air it because they want me to give equal time to the other side, which is asinine. And we ended up like basically debating theology. It would be like, well, Ecclesiastes 4:17 says this or whatever, so it didn't really, I didn't really think that was necessary. But anyway, he said like, well, I'm not surprised at all. And, I'm glad that you got something out of it at least, but he was kind of disappointed. So I wonder, do you have any similar anecdotes where it seemed as though there was pressure either not to cover this at all or to come at it with a predetermined angle or...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have an experience with one of my editors. So every Pride month, around this time, I report on the struggle or LGBT people in Burma. I don't know if my editor have, any bias like against LGBTQ issue, but he once told me that I was using journalism platform to promote LGBTQ issue. I don't think that was true because I write unbiased story that reflect the reality on the ground. At the time, I'm not a little kid anymore. Instead of keeping quiet, like when I used to be with my grandma, I spoke up for myself and told senior management about the issue. I explained that I wanted to focus on, giving a voice to minority people. After the talk, he didn't bring it up again. It felt really good to know, they understood and respect my commitment to fair reporting. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's just really unfair when people will say that if you're merely reporting on the issue, you're promoting LGBTQ issues or using your job as a platform to promote something like that. That's just totally unfair.
It seems like it reflects their bias more, right? Because they're equating exposure to advocacy.
And in my own story, like when I was doing that, they said, it seems like it's an issue that you feel very strongly about. Like maybe that's why you wanted to cover this thing. I mean, because like, does it affect you like that? And I wasn't ready to discuss anything like that, but and that's the way it came out. So
yeah, this is also what happened to me when I was in Southeast Asia. Because as I mentioned before, like my editor told me like not to cover too much about LGBTQIA community because the Newsroom just didn't want that, and it was too much for them. And about 5 years ago when I wasn't there, most of the story related to community was focused on like dramatic and negative aspect of being a part of the community. The headlines were filled with story about parents rejecting the children or the loneliness and isolation of being gay, or if they have some dramas about gay or lesbian. So gay or lesbian, those words will be on the headline for sure. And I think that why this story reflects a part of the reality of many LGBTQIA individuals, but they often painted a very incomplete and overwhelmingly negative picture.
So I guess, are you saying then that stories with that kind of angle tend to be more popular then? Like
I would say that because people they love reading like negative or like shocking story.
Like and the like, drama of it.
Like a gay couple like did something bad, for example, or gay man like steal something, that would go to the headline. And people would click on that and they will have a very bad impression about gay people. Yeah.
Okay, but the Newsroom does not want that.
They don't want to paint like a very like progressive picture, from my understanding, about a community.
I find that we in journalism have come a long way on the sort of both sides issue, although there's still a lot of room to grow generally on that. I think that, take climate change, for example. Yeah. There was a time when, even a mainstream newsroom might say, okay, if you're doing a story talking to scientists who are saying that, climate change is a real and present danger, you have to, find someone who says the opposite of that in order to maintain some preconceived notion of balance. I think we've, a lot of mainstream newsrooms have gotten to a place where we understand that there are some things that are fact and we need to report on those facts without presenting a non-factual view on the other side of it. I think when it comes to stories just about the existence of LGBTQIA individuals, I don't think that on the other side of it, it's, that you need to have a voice saying, no, indeed, people like those of us in this room who are LGBTQIA shouldn't exist. So I think that there's, you can debate the merits of particular stories based on their subject matter, but the notion of having to have a counterbalance to LGBTQIA people exist and here's what they do in the world. I hope we have passed that by.
Right.
So this question is more for Phoe and Wilson, but what has LGBTQIA coverage been like in your home countries? And have you noticed a big difference compared to coverage in America?
So yes, here in US, I have seen like many LGBTQ journalists, hosts, and broadcasters who are really out and proud. Most of their audience have no issue with it and celebrate Pride very proudly on their channel. I find it like really inspiring. For instance, Gio Benitez from Good Morning America is one of my favorite. he's always out and proud, and he's hosts like pride event every year. Of course, like Anderson Cooper and Robin Roberts are also my big inspiration for me. But it's really different in Burma. People say, hey, Burma is in war right now. It's not the time to talk about the LGBTQ issue. So there are other things to focus on. I totally understand their point of view, but I believe we also need to include LGBTQ issue. You cannot achieve true democracy without including LGBTQ rights, We can leave out minorities, especially now, but these days, since the coup, young Burmese people believe this revolution is a fight for everyone's right, including LGBTQ rights.
Yeah, you'll find a lot of times that whenever people say things like that, like there's this big war going on, we can't really worry about this right now. Like, well, there's always going to be something going on all the time. So when would be the right time to talk about these kinds of things? When society is chill and nice and there are no major problems. Oh, okay, now we can talk about it. But when is that going to be? It'll be like the economy's in the tank. We can't talk about it right now. Or, oh my gosh, there was a natural disaster last week. We can't really talk about that right now. I mean, it's gonna always be something there. So.
Right. And by talk about that, it's these people who exist and are members of everyone's families.
Right.
No. We gotta leave that too radioactive. That
I'm curious for Khwar. You mentioned how young Burmese people think like the revolution is like a fight for everyone's rights, and we've read that the coup has made Burmese people more sympathetic to Rohingya rights and things. But does that also apply to minorities, not ethnic minorities in Burma?
Oh yes. So yeah, that's right. When I left Burma, I cannot find together for LGBTQ community, but around 2018, things has been improving, with more acceptance, especially democratic government. I mean, we even have a big pride celebration in downtown Yangon, which is really, really rare. I think after the coup, I have seen people coming together and becoming more acceptant, no matter their race, their sexual orientation or anything like that.
But I guess on the young people side of it, do you see a difference demographically between are younger folks generally more accepting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Old people are not very accepting yet.
Yeah. So Wilson, in your home country, would you say that there's also a demographic difference there with young people being more accepting and older people not so much, or is it a bit different than that?
Yeah, it's the same. Young people are more openly to that, and for the older generation, they're aware of this, but for them, these LGBT people, they are everywhere in the society, but not in the family.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'll say I remember the coverage of the protests for Seoul Pride, but the Christian anti-Pride side would always be older churchgoers.
Yeah, it was always a coalition of many of the different congregations, but they'd sometimes bring their kids out too, and they'd hold these signs of anti same-sex marriage, and these kids who have no idea of what any of that is all about, and they're sitting there chanting homophobic slurs against people. It's really awful. Whenever you'd walk past it, or if you were trying to attend it, they'd be handing you out flyers and everything, and it'd show you this verse says this and this verse says that. And when I described the event, I said these are self-proclaimed Christians because, I don't want to debate theology on this podcast or anything, but Christianity is supposed, if you look at messages of what Jesus was talking about, it was generally be nice to everybody, accept people for who they are. Those are very Christian-like qualities. So I think the message might be getting missed somewhere, and I don't know exactly where that is.
I have a question for Khwar, because most of the people in Myanmar are Buddhists. So did you find did you think it was difficult for you to come out because of the Buddhism values, or is there anything to do with Buddhism values?
Oh yes, I don't know, because I was come out when I was a little kid. I'm just born as a gay man, I knew, but I don't know. Most of the monks say it's against Buddhism rule, but it doesn't really have on what the Buddha say. It, like you can say, it's be kind to other people and accept who they are. Buddha didn't say to discriminate to someone because of being gay.
Yeah, and I'm not very well versed in Buddhism, but one of the tenets that is most popular, people say life is suffering.
I mean, it could be suffering until you know how to accept yourself.
Right,
I think you need to accept yourself first. Yeah.
That's what I meant. I didn't mean okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, but it's a good point in that it is. Yeah, I mean, there is. Everybody's got something, right?
Yes.
And so it's that's one of the joys of the human experience is that we've all got something that some bully on the schoolyard points at and goes like, that's why you're different. And for those of us who are or at least for me, being LGBTQIA was one of those things. And so but that's. So I guess kind of getting back to the life is suffering element, it's something we've all got something about ourselves that we that either someone looks down upon or that we are taught ourselves to look down upon. Maybe if we all realized that a little bit more, we could be more accepting of other people. But for each of us, I think we have to go on that journey.
I want to add about like LGBTQ coverage in my home country. I will just focus on the positive changes because I don't want to repeat myself. There's been some more inclusive and positive story in the last few years with like showcasing acceptance, resilience, and accomplishment of the community. There's a funny example in my home country right now. There's a famous gay couple who just became like a social media sensation. They now become like an A-list star in my home country. But despite their popularity, they avoid using the term gay or couple to themselves, so because they say that they are afraid that they will face like a strong backlash from the community. So they use like different words: gay, not couple, not love.
What do they use?
Isn't it obvious though? Like if
they are a couple on social media, on TikTok, but they call themselves like a company with two people.
A conscious coupling.
Yes, and
okay.
So because they're afraid people will like have a strong reaction towards them. So
it's hard to wrap my head around because you describe. I mean, isn't it obvious from their content that they're together? I mean,
they are together. They've been together for like 10 years, but they don't want to like label themselves like love or gay couple because they're afraid of that. Yeah.
All right.
I do want to add though, going back to the conversation about religion in Asia.
Yeah.
Like up until a few days ago, Taiwan was the only Asian area that legalized same-sex marriage. Shout out Thailand. But even in Taiwan, there's like still, resistance from there is like a very Christian presence that is against still all of like same-sex marriage rights and stuff.
So, I'll say self-proclaimed Christian.
Yes, self-proclaimed Christian movements.
Okay.
And as I think the only gay married person in the room, I think that that's so it's funny. My husband and I have been together since before we could get married, and so obviously the a Obergefell decision in the United States that legalized gay marriage in 2015, was a turning point for gay relationships, or at least for the official kind of codification of gay relationships in the United States. But like a lot of things, that's tenuous, right? We've seen other Supreme Court decisions that have been overturned.
Yes.
There's always the concern that that this one could be too. And so there's it's a moving target. Luckily, as we talked about earlier, societal change on this particular topic seems to have moved really far, really fast. And that's been really heartening to live through. But it's really great to see more people be able to, be authentically themselves. But it's, I think being a person living as a gay person, you have to sort of accept the notion that that there can be waxes and wanes to this. So, and that, things that people take for granted, maybe outside the LGBTQIA community, can be, given and taken away, which is an odd feeling.
All right. So next question. How has coverage in the U.S. changed and evolved?
Yeah. And also, so Greg, you just also mentioned that, it was the public opinion has shifted very rapidly. I wonder if that's a result of shifting coverage, or if the shifting coverage is the result of the public opinion shifting, in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's sort of one helping the other. I think it's also, we've talked a little bit about pop culture, but but I think more people that people recognize coming out, and so that's people on television, like obviously a big example is Ellen DeGeneres in the 1990s in the U.S. Coming out on her sitcom, and then also being present in her talk show, and she has talked in interviews about the period in between her sitcom and her talk show being a particularly difficult one, because she was out in that vanguard of people who were coming out rather early, or I guess not early, but earlier than people were ready for, I guess. And so, but as something that, at least from my vantage point, from what I've seen, it's as more people that or recognize come out, it seems that acceptance tends to come along with it. It's just, I know Ellen DeGeneres. Like, I see her on TV all the time. She's not that bad. Well, maybe these gay people aren't so bad after all. And then that helps with, for people like, people like us who aren't on TV to come out, and then, my grandson's gay, so okay, well, that must be okay. Or, and so I think that helps. The more that you can raise your hand, Khwar, you brought up Anderson Cooper and Robin Roberts, and, people that you see all the time, so I think that there's that layer of famous people who have been coming out. Mm-hmm. That helps, us non-famous people to do it as well. And that sort of, and so, yeah, I think that's what helped. I don't remember the numbers, but there's been a significant change when, people were polled on the question of, would you support, gay marriage? Should it be legal in the United States? And the difference between the answers in the 1990s and the answers in the 2010s were significant. And I think it's partially because of this sort of like combination of pop culture and what people are seeing in their own families. Because, gay people are born to families of not gay people.
Just another anecdote. So, have you guys heard of the series Captain Underpants, which is a children's book?
No.
It's like my son's a big fan. And so there's one book where they went to the future to talk to their future selves because they ran out of ideas or something. They wanted to get an idea of what they had done in the past. So they go to talk to their future selves. One of them is married and to a woman, and the other one is married to a man, and they have families together, and they're just talking to both of the families and saying, what did we write about in this month of this year? And then they explain it, and they go back to the past and write it, but like that's treated like very matter-of-factly, and they don't wow, I married a man? Am I gay? Like, that wasn't even part of it. Like, and my son's reading it, and he's like, oh, okay, he's married, whatever. And then and I can't imagine anything from my own childhood where if they would have done something that would have been a huge scandal, it would have been a huge thing. Like, so it's not just only real people. I mean, there's fictitious people.
Yeah. Or like, wasn't it the Arthur show where
Arthur. That's the mouse with the glasses?
The aardvark, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Where his principal or his teacher, Mr. Ratburn, gets married in like one of the recent episodes, but he gets married to another man, and like the whole class comes to his wedding.
Cool. And it's not, it's just a thing, and people just accept it for how it is. And so I think things are really definitely changing quickly.
Yeah. One of the things that I watched probably too much TikTok. And one of the things that I enjoy watching too much TikTok is seeing all of the like younger folks who are LGBTQIA+ and are talking about it. And are like out there living lives and, and being authentically themselves. And, when I was, in high school in the 1990s in the US where, things were nowhere near as bad as what some of my colleagues have described, I did not know one out gay person in my high school, including myself. and so I look at people, my in the next generation who have a very different experience to that, and that's so exciting.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to see more or less of in terms of coverage of LGBTQIA issues?
So yeah, I think LGBTQIA plus, community is not asking for special right, just the same right and protection as everyone else. So we should definitely have raised their voices. And I wanted to see more balanced coverage of LGBTQIA plus story, not just the challenge and discrimination, but also the success and resilience and contribution to the society. Yeah.
I also love to see more balance and diverse coverage. It's important to go beyond the typical narrative of struggles and hardships. While these stories are crucial and reflect real challenges, but we must highlight the positive aspects. And for instance, featuring more story about LGBTQIA individuals who are making significant contribution in various fields or who have found acceptance and support in their community. These kind of story can provide a more rounded and hopeful perspective, especially for those still in the closet. On the flip side, I'd like to see less sensationalism and stereotyping the LGBTQIA coverage. Media often resort to dramatic and negative portrayal of that reinforce harmful stereotypes. Moving away from these approach and towards more authentic and respectful storytelling would greatly benefit the community and foster a more inclusive society.
Yeah. I'd plus one on that. I think, my challenge to news organizations today is be less boring. Like LGBTQIA stories, come on, just the fact that someone is in the LGBTQIA community, not interesting enough. Talk to me about their skills. Talk to me about what they've done. Talk to me about what makes what makes the person you're featuring, what makes the group that you're talking about special. I think that's one of the ways that we can get beyond some of the challenges is to talk about what sort of accomplishments individuals have, and and how there are people within this community who are making the world better every day.
When you're talking about somebody's skills or accomplishments, maybe talking about the orientation isn't completely necessary. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Like, so for example, you take somebody like Megan Rapinoe, who's like one of the most prolific women's soccer players ever. She's a lesbian. Yeah. But like every interview is not going to be like, oh, so tell me about being lesbian. It's going to be about, well, what were you thinking when you scored that amazing goal against China or Brazil or whoever? So yeah, I mean,
exactly what you just said. Yeah. I want the story to be like, please mention it. Like I'm sure I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think if I had a story written about me, I'd be happy to talk about my husband and our cat and how we're trying to raise her right. But I would, in that feature, put that in its proper context, as that's a part of my life, but that's certainly not the biggest part of my life. I mean, living with my husband and the life that we built together is the biggest part of my life, but the fact that I happen to be gay is not.
Right. So then, if that's not an aspect of it, is that really covering LGBTQIA individuals? And well, I mean, I guess it is, but you're not really bringing that to the story, so then it's not really a coverage of.
I mean, I'd change that to basically any characteristic about a person, right? So I think I listened to the RFA Insider episode that you all had about Asian American heritage, and I guess I would turn that question the same sort of way, right? Like how do people want coverage about any group, or the fact that you are a member of any group to which you might be a member. How would you want that? If that story was about you, how would you want that to be captured? And I would, at least for me, I would put being LGBTQIA in the same bucket.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not opposing you at all.
No, I think we agree.
But so like when you're talking about Asian American representation, for example, that's a very visible thing in many cases. Yeah. Whereas being LGBTQIA plus isn't necessarily as visible unless you're standing next to somebody. And that's why I'm saying it's like kind of a catch-22 of like you want more representation, but you don't want it to be like token representation.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, though.
Okay. No, I think you are.
Okay.
I'm with you. I'm Team Eugene on this.
Okay, great.
All right. So last question. What do you think newsrooms can do to uplift LGBTQIA voices? So I'll start by saying, just like on the topic of representation, I what stood out to me coverage-wise was Anderson Cooper's coverage of the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016. And I think during the broadcast, he chose not to name the gunman, and he instead, went down the list of every single victim from the shooting. And while doing so, he choked up halfway through the list of victims. And for a few moments, it was just silent, and we were just watching this really prominent news anchor try to contain his own pain at what happened to this community that he's connected to. And that willingness to be vulnerable and empathetic kind of drove home how devastating the shooting was in a way that other reports maybe didn't as efficiently convey. So I thought that was really powerful, and I guess I just remember that as really impactful coverage for something that, like a tragedy that happened.
I was living overseas at the time, and I actually didn't see that, so it's kind of choking me up to even hear secondhand about that. That's really profound, I think.
Can I have a question?
Sure.
I have a mixed feeling about this. Does the LGBTQIA community need to be uplifted by Newsroom? Can Newsroom, they can just, in my opinion, they can just do their job, fair and balanced reporting, and just reflect the truth. Just don't use the community as clickbait, or don't find balanced story like that. I mean, just doing a journalist's job. I think so. I don't know. Yeah.
A lot of years ago, right around the time that Facebook was becoming a thing, I was asked to feedback on this idea for a product that a group had about they wanted to create, and again, this was 2004, they wanted to create a gay social network. And so I was listening the whole time for, okay, so what's going to be different from, so at the time we had, Facebook was just starting. We had MySpace, we had Friendster, Friendster. Oh yeah. The world we lived in then. And so I was listening for, okay, so what's different about this, right? What's really going to make it stand out? I didn't hear anything. And so I said, so it's just a social network? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, but it'll be gay people in it. And I said, so just a social network then. And so I think it's the same kind of thing. It's on one hand, we obviously cannot overlook the fact that, that folks in the LGBTQIA plus community, are in some cases, are can be underrepresented. They can still, as my colleagues have illustrated, still face a lot of hardships, still face a lot of discrimination, even here in the United States where things are a bit better. But when it comes to LGBTQIA plus stories, or about people in this community, or stories about people in this community, I think I'd agree with Wilson that there's, that it's. I don't know. I feel like I want more than just this person happens to be a part of this community to be their story, or for there to be a reason to. I just want the stories to be good, and good in the well told is what I mean. Just dig it, tell me something new, tell me something interesting about this person. Don't just tell me they've got brown eyes.
All right. So we want to thank our guests for joining us today and sharing some of their experiences and stories with us. So thank you guys for coming on.
Okay, and for Amy Lee, I'm Eugene Huang. This episode of RFA Insider is now to close.
Stay cool. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Oh,